Tonight on Ukraine Today, energy terror, the occupiers waited for the coldest day in Ukraine and then struck the energy sector. For the first time in this war, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed a heavy flamethrower system on the territory of Russia. A silent weapon of guaranteed revenge. What do we know about Ukraine's heavy unmanned underwater vehicle Marichka? A new nuclear race. What will happen after the US-Russia treaty of limiting nuclear arsenals expires? All this and more right now. Hello, I'm Volodymyr Rabchun and this is Ukraine Today. Please subscribe, like this video, and let's get to the news. We begin with the events of last night. I'm talking about a massive Russian attack. So the occupiers waited for the coldest days in Ukraine and then hit the energy sector. They attacked combined heat and power plants and thermal power stations. They used ballistic missiles, cruise missiles and drones. How do you like this so-called energy ceasefire or energy truce, Mr. Trump? In total, more than 500 aerial attack assets were launched. Ukrainian air defense forces neutralized 450 of them, but unfortunately there were hits. In Kyiv, 1,170 apartment buildings were left without heating. Let me remind you, outside temperatures dropped to minus 25 degrees Celsius, that's minus 13 in Fahrenheit. Some districts are also without electricity. In Kharkiv, 820 buildings have no heat. Heating problems are also reported in the Sumy region. In the Odessa region, 50,000 people are without power. Critical infrastructure is operating on generators. In the Vinnytsia region, 50 settlements were left without electricity. But energy sector was not the only target. In Kyiv, at least 11 high-rise buildings, a kindergarten, gas station, and cars were damaged during the night attack. At least 5 people were injured. In addition, the occupiers damaged the base of the Motherland Monument. This is where the Hall of Glory of the National Museum of the History of Ukraine in the Second World War is located. Kyiv residents hiding from Russian missiles and drones set up a tent camp in the metro. During attacks, underground stations operate as bomb shelter. In the Kyiv region, at least 3 people were injured in the night attack. 5 private houses, an educational and rehabilitation center and vehicles were damaged. Now to some good news. For the first time, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed a heavy flamethrower system on Russian territory. This happened in the Belgorod region. In these images, you can see a Ukrainian drone hitting a Russian Solntsepek system directly. Moments later, it explodes. Ukraine's general staff also confirmed successful strikes on several Russian military facilities. In the temporarily occupied part of the Zaporizhzhia region, a training center for drone pilots and an FPV drone production site were hit, as well as concentrations of enemy personnel. In the temporarily occupied part of the Donetsk region, Russian electronic warfare system was destroyed. More details about the battlefield situation in the report.
The Belarusian Air Force has received a new batch of Su-30 SM-2 fighter jets from Russia. They can be equipped with R-37M missiles, which are believed to be capable of hitting aerial targets at distances of up to 200 kilometers.
First of all, it's important to know the technical condition of this aircraft. That's the first thing. Secondly, considering how often Russian Shaheds fly into Belarusian territory, I can assume that Russia is trying to compensate Belarusians for these inconveniences so that the Belarusians themselves would shoot down these flying vehicles, strike drones like the Shahed Goran over their own country. Well, it's a kind of moral and aviation compensation.
Russia has tripled the production of missiles for the Iskander systems thanks to assistance from China.
First of all, Russia is indeed focusing on ballistic missiles. That's already obvious today. For example, in January, they launched more than 90 missiles at our territories over the course of the month. That's more than there was at the peak moment on October 25th. For example, it's obvious that the Chinese component is present not only in these missiles, but also components from Western countries and American companies. These are so-called parts or dual-use components.
China has increased its supply to Russia of priority dual-use goods, including computer chips, machine tools, radars, and sensors, which the Russian Federation uses for military purposes. In addition, in 2024, China accounted for 70% of Russia's imports of ammonium perchlorate, a necessary component of fuel for ballistic missiles, according to analysts. Detonate a nuclear bomb in space and switch to carrier pigeons. This was the proposal made by Russian propagandist Vladimir Solovyov.
Let's tell the truth. What is Starlink? It's the strategic militarization and weaponization of space. Because every single project and innovation Musk has worked on, everything we see now, is fundamentally designed to serve the strategic interests of the ongoing war against Russia.
While propagandists in Russia are imagining threats, their troops in Ukraine are facing a real danger. Frightened, freezing occupiers are being eliminated by Ukrainian FPV drones in the Pokrovsk direction. In January 2026, about a third of all assaults on the front took place in that same Pokrovsk direction. In second place is Huliaipol. 21% of the assaults took place there.
The Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad agglomeration remains a priority and is the most intense in terms of the number of assaults and the offensive actions by the Russians. Accordingly, there are tactical level actions taking place in the Kostiantynivka direction, the Lyman direction, increased activity near Chasiv Yar and in Toretsk. And in fact, the deadlines that the Russians have somehow set for themselves, oddly enough, for almost the 1st of April this year, concern their advance toward the Slovyansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration, which accordingly has been a fortified area since 2014.
The occupiers are trying to break through in the Slovyansk direction.
The terrorist component has started to be used more actively by the enemy, although it has always been used. This is the aviation component, strikes with guided aerial bombs, high explosive aerial bombs on Slovyansk, on Kramatorsk, on these communities, the settlements that make up these communities. Again, the course of offensive actions will depend on how successfully the Russians achieve their objectives in the Lyman direction, in the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad direction, and accordingly on their attempts to stretch our reserves by creating pressure along the entire front. It is obvious that this is also one of the Russians' objectives.
New aid to Ukraine from its partners. Sweden is preparing one of the largest security packages for Ukraine: air defense systems, SABI radars, electronic warfare equipment, and drones, including deep strike, according to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense.
Over the past 24 hours, Russia lost at least 760 occupiers killed and wounded. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, Russian total losses now amount to 1,242,290 personnel. In the last day alone, Ukraine's defense forces also destroyed 6 Russian tanks, 4 armored combat vehicles, 53 artillery systems and dozens of other pieces of enemy military equipment. Some technical specifications of Ukraine's heavy unmanned underwater vehicle Marichka have now become public. The developers themselves revealed the details. So, the range of Marichka is 1,000 kilometers, payload capacity more than 1,000 kilograms, speed 10 kilometers per hour. In practice, this is a slow, long-range torpedo. The system is designed to strike stationary targets such as bridge supports or ships docked in ports. Ukraine and NATO have agreed on cooperation priorities: air defense, combat aviation and HIMARS. This was discussed during a meeting between Ukraine's defense minister, Mikhailo Fedorov, and representatives of the North Atlantic Alliance. More on Fedorov's first steps in his new position and their impact on the battlefield. In the report.
Ukraine's new Minister of Defense, Mikhailo Fedorov, has begun reforming the Ukrainian army at a rapid pace, which has caused hysteria among Putin's supporters.
Indeed, he's a competent organizer of drone production. And now he has set the goal of increasing the losses of the Russian Federation's armed forces to 50,000 per month, thanks to drones. And in general, I believe this is a serious enemy, a serious challenge.
The first and main statement of the new minister is to increase Russian soldiers' losses to an irreversible 50,000.
To make the cost of war for Russia so high that it simply cannot bear it. To stop the enemy by force. To stop the enemy by force.
He presented the general tactical and strategic plan of the armed forces of Ukraine. There are no ambiguous arrows on the map in the plan, no wishful thinking. There is none of that verbose general's talk. The new minister's plan fits into 5 words and 1 number. The plan is formulated as follows: to kill 50,000 Russian orcs every month. It's remarkably concise and highly constructive, and exceptionally realistic.
War correspondents are whining that such a figure is quite realistic since Putin and his military leadership do not want to give up on the idea of meat assaults.
To be more specific, if we discuss the subject of losses, this desired target figure, it unfortunately can very well be achieved. Not so long ago, Magyar reported that they came up with a figure for destroyed targets, specifically personnel, confirmed that over 30,000. That is, essentially, that's what we get in the troops in a month.
The second innovation from Fedorov is finally to disconnect Russians from smuggled Starlinks and completely shut down their communications and drone control systems.
We need Starlink to work there because certain technologies are used that are also important for us. They are connected to drones. There is another way to make sure our Starlinks work, while the Starlinks that appear there essentially do not work by other means. And so we are working with SpaceX to solve this issue.
Elon Musk himself supported the idea and said he would help in any way he could.
It seems that the steps we have taken to prevent the unauthorized use of Starlink by Russia have borne fruit. Let us know if additional measures are needed.
We've come up with an even simpler method. As I understand it, Starlink satellites will soon only serve those terminals in Ukraine that are on the so-called whitelist. That is, units in the armed forces of Ukraine and ordinary Ukrainians who have these very Starlinks, they need to add their terminals to the whitelist, register them there, and then continue using the internet as before. But the Russians won't be able to do this. They won't be able to add their smuggled terminals to this whitelist, and so their terminals will soon all turn into pumpkins. Yes.
It's been less than a month since Fedorov was appointed Minister of Defense, and the Russians are already in a real panic over the first new changes. What will happen next is anyone's guess, but it will be very interesting to watch.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. Now's the time to subscribe to the channel, like this video and share it so more people can see it. Thank you and glory to Ukraine. India has agreed to stop buying Russian oil. This was announced by the US President Donald Trump after a conversation with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. According to Trump, this decision will help bring the war in Ukraine closer to an end. No excessive optimism yet, still, India's decision could indeed have a positive impact. However, the Kremlin continues cooperation with other states. Some of them, such as China, Iran and North Korea, are helping Russia increase its military potential. Thanks to Beijing, Russia has tripled its production of Iskander ballistic missiles. Officially neutral, China is in reality one of the key donors to Russia's military-industrial complex.
China has become the rear base of the Russian military complex.
We have developed a unique relationship with China. That's true.
The total value of technologies and equipment supplied to the aggressor country by Xi amounts to more than $10 billion.
This heavy reliance on the exportation of goods, of course, consequently renders the Russian Federation significantly more reliant on China, which is perfectly consistent with and supports China's long-term goals of the strategic and gradual economic absorption of the Russian state.
The Celestial Empire has become an accomplice to Putin's war crimes and is helping the Kremlin ramp up weapons production.
In the defense sector, China has significantly increased its exports to Russia of priority goods or dual-use items, including computer chips, machine tools, radars, and sensors that Russia needs to sustain its military operations.
All of these are on the list of the most critically important goods, the export of which to Russia has been banned by 39 countries, including the United Kingdom and the United States. According to a Telegraph investigation, China is supplying Russia with specialized machine tools. They are being purchased in huge quantities. These support Russia's defense production, particularly in the Alabuga Special Economic Zone, where Shahed drones are manufactured. In addition to machine tools, Beijing has supplied the Kremlin with radar and electronic warfare crystals worth $97 million, microchips and memory boards worth $4.9 billion for precision weapons and Sukhoi fighter jets, ball bearings, critical for aviation, worth $130 million, and telescopic sights totaling $42 million. There have also been recorded deliveries of UAV bodies, lithium batteries, and fiber optic cables for drone production.
No, we are simply thinking about how to organize our own work in the best possible way and, by joining forces, achieve positive results.
The Russian Federation has become critically dependent on friendly Beijing, even in the production of missiles for the Iskanders. Thanks to this support, the Kremlin was able to triple their production volume.
Only 36 missiles were produced in the first 11 months of the full-scale war. 30 missiles were produced monthly in November 2023, and already 50 missiles are being produced monthly as of December 2025.
It was China that supplied the missile factory in the city of Votkinsk with a unique lathe for machining metal for warheads. Votkinsk produces the very same Oreshnik missile and other ballistic missiles.
Thus, the plant is becoming the largest center of missile production. They started with single-stage missiles, then came the Pioneer, Topol, and Topol-M. There are too many to list them all. Let's just say that many of the products from the Votkinsk plant have now become exhibits in the closed museum of the Strategic Missile Forces.
These are the missiles that make up the current arsenal. And if we're talking about nuclear deterrence forces, then 2 out of the 3 components in terms of missiles are provided by the Votkinsk plant.
Later, these missiles are used by Russians to strike Ukrainian cities, destroying infrastructure and killing Ukrainians.
After the announcement of an energy truce, Russia launched an Iskander-M and 111 UAVs at Ukraine. Russia carried out a combined attack on Kryvyi Rih, launching more than 70 drones and an Iskander-M ballistic missile. Civilian infrastructure was damaged. More than 3,100 customers were left without electricity, and miners were also trapped underground. After the massive shelling carried out by Russia on the night of January 24th, an unexploded warhead from an Iskander-M ballistic missile was found.
In 2024, China supplied about 70% of Russia's imports of a key component for ballistic missile fuel. Despite the fact that China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs rejected accusations that Beijing is supplying Russia with specialized equipment and machinery, China is currently the key trading partner of the aggressor country. Its share in Russia's foreign trade has grown by almost 34%.
Over these years, especially since the full-scale invasion of Russia into Ukraine, China has essentially replaced almost all technological sectors of the Russian Federation with its own goods and services.
The Kremlin does not have enough of its own production capacity to manufacture such goods in sufficient quantities, while China's large-scale manufacturing sector allows for serial production of weapons.
China has already entered, even now, in fact, into all the key sectors of the Russian economy, and in many cases, it destroyed what was inconvenient for it and simply took over what could be used for its own benefit.
China has found a benefit in this. In addition to making money, there is also a technology exchange. Journalists examined footage of Chinese Air Force planes and saw that the bombers were armed with KD-21 aeroballistic missiles, which are analogues of the Russian Kinzhal. It is possible that the Chinese missile was developed based on it.
This story is very similar to what happened earlier in the Soviet Union, when the state directed all its efforts exclusively toward the military-industrial complex, while the entire civilian sector either lagged behind or was completely dependent on exports.
Moscow is losing the initiative, turning into Beijing's junior partner. The economy of the Russian Federation ended the year 2025 in a deep crisis. Oil prices have fallen to a 5-year low. Oil export revenues have dropped by about 20%. The US has increased its sanctions pressure. Trump signed a bipartisan law that significantly expands the scope of restrictions, and the European Union is preparing to adopt yet another, the 20th package of sanctions against the Kremlin.
Ukraine has officially recognized Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization. This was announced by President Volodymyr Zelensky. Let me remind you, Iran is a nuclear state and an ally of Putin's regime. Although, after recent events in the Islamic Republic, the war with Israel, the Ayatollah regime has largely lost its nuclear potential. But it looks like a new global nuclear race is beginning. This Thursday, the US-Russia agreement on limiting nuclear arsenals expires. What happens next? The answer in the report.
A new nuclear arms race could begin as early as this week. On February 5th, the New START Treaty, also known as START 3 between Moscow and Washington, which limits strategic offensive arms, is set to expire.
If it expires, then it expires. We'll just make a better agreement.
On the eve of the expiration of New START, which sets a cap for each side at 1,550 deployed nuclear warheads, Donald Trump made it clear to Putin that the US is not interested in Russia's proposal to extend the main provisions of the treaty for another year.
Why is Russia and Putin personally in such a hurry to extend New START? He's even ready to unilaterally extend it, to do whatever it takes. The answer is very simple. Putin doesn't want to let China, which is rapidly building up its nuclear capabilities, actively join this treaty. Because then the uniqueness of the Russian Federation as the world's second nuclear power simply disappears. Because once this treaty includes 3 parties, well then tomorrow there could be a 4th participant and a 5th.
The White House believes that a new nuclear deal should be made not only with Moscow but also with Beijing. At the same time, China has categorically rejected Washington's proposal.
It is unreasonable and unrealistic to ask China to join nuclear disarmament talks with the US and Russia. China has always maintained its nuclear capabilities at the minimum level necessary for national security and has never participated in an arms race with anyone.
But the Chinese communists are being disingenuous. In the past few years, China has sharply increased its nuclear arsenal, nearly doubling it. Currently, the Middle Kingdom possesses more than 600 warheads, and according to Pentagon forecasts, by 2030, the Chinese plan to expand to as many as 1,000 doomsday warheads.
The world is on the brink of a new arms race. I don't think there will be another treaty limiting the number of nuclear weapons in my lifetime.
As experts note, the main value of the existing treaty was not only in quantitative limits, but also in the processes of mutual monitoring, inspections, and data exchange. However, the entire inspection process was first suspended during the COVID-19 pandemic and then completely ceased when Putin, in an attempt to intimidate the world, halted Russia's participation in the treaty in the second year of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
New START is part of Putin's ideological construct, which they have been feeding to Russians through their propaganda for decades. I would certainly urge a great deal of caution in making any firm predictions right now. But despite the pressing fact that the current treaty is set to expire on February 5th, the United States government will not only insist on including China in the new framework, but they will also seek to fundamentally and comprehensively restructure the specific terms of the treaty to ensure its strict implementation. And above all, this pressure will be directed, of course, toward the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China.
And finally, and I don't even know how to call this, cynicism, corruption, ignorance? How would you describe the behavior of FIFA president Gianni Infantino, who said that the ban of Russia's participation in competitions should be lifted? According to Sky News, Infantino claims that sanctions achieved nothing and only increased frustration and hatred. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha responded to the statements. He said that Russia continues to kill Ukrainian civilians and has no intention of ending the war. Under such condition, there can be no talk of returning Russian teams to international football. Russia keeps killing, while moral degenerates suggest lifting bans. It's hard to disagree with Mr. Sybiha. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share. See you next time.